Good evening, Father Murr, on Wednesday, June 5th, 2024.
And a hearty good evening to you, Dr. Moynihan.
It's a tremendous pleasure each week to speak with you, and I really enjoyed our visit with you in Spain. You're in southern Spain near Seville, and that place is becoming a spiritual retreat center. People are coming there for spiritual healing. It's just beginning to become known.
It's kind of amazing. As a matter of fact, it scares me. Yes, but I've got a lot of people who see this program and other programs have contacted me, as I've told them they're free to do, and would like to speak at length with me. And many have come over, and thank God for the invention of the internet. A lot of them have had phone conversations with me, video conversations, which are fantastic also. And it gives me keeps me off the streets
and
out of trouble.
And so that's a wonderful development. And we wanted to reset here on June 5th, 2024. So many things are happening. It's confusing to many people, and sometimes we are ourselves confused. Tomorrow is the anniversary of D-Day, the attack of the Allies on the Normandy coast.
Right.
In 1944, when the Second World War was still raging and the Allies came over from England. So many people participated. And it was, in a sense, the beginning of the rolling up of the Axis, or the German forces from France back to Germany, and the defeat of the Germans in the Second World War. Tomorrow, the president of France is supposed to be talking about the contribution of French troops to the Ukraine war on D-Day. He's choosing D-Day, according to reports, to announce that he will be putting several thousand French troops into the action in Ukraine, where on the far right side of Ukraine, the green country there on the map, the Russians have come into the two sort of Russian ethnic areas, Russian-speaking areas in the so-called Donbass, that's Donetsk and Luhansk. And the battle lines have been drawn for almost 2 years now in this terrible war. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers have been killed. But this map just came out yesterday in a release, and it's been now published on the internet. It's a map of land corridors for NATO troop movements in Europe. And these are showing where US troops, that's the American flag there, the stars and stripes, would come to Norway, come across Norway and Sweden and Finland to attack or defend Russia there in the north. There's American forces who would land in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. They'd come across special trains set up for them to the Baltic countries and to Poland. And then the southern route would be to land in Italy, have special trains and transports to take them across northern Italy, Slovenia, Hungary, and Hungary has a border with Ukraine. And the final one would be from Greece and Turkey up. I shivered when I saw this map. I have been opposed to the terrors of war. Of course, sometimes we do have a doctrine of the necessity of a just war if you're being attacked and you're defending yourself. But this map reminds me that we had 2 wars in Europe which killed millions of people. We had a period of peace after the Iron Curtain came down and the Soviet Union dissolved, but we are now seemingly on the edge of a 3rd World War, something Pope Francis has said many times. And I don't want to be a fearmonger, but I just wanted your comments and reflections and see if we could take this to a spiritual level, Father Murr.
Everything has a spiritual side to it, of course, but so much of this smacks of American politics and Western politics, right? But American politics primarily. I've always seen war since Vietnam. And I've heard rumors about World War II and some about World War I as being politically motivated. Yeah. In other words, there were a lot of conspiracy theorists, even back when I was a young man, but the reason that we entered World War II was this and the other thing, for political reasons. And I remember reading many articles that we got in high school about Vietnam, the reasons we were in Vietnam. And it was the first time that I stopped thinking that we were anywhere in the world for peace, justice, and freedom.
Mm.
I started thinking, no, there are other reasons, money being one of them, political influence, maneuvering, this, that, and the other thing. They weren't for what I'm trying to say is they weren't for the great ideals that soldiers go to war for and give their lives for.
Yeah.
And this war, Robert, since you ask, particularly smacks of that to me. I see this as a political maneuver. I see it not divorced from upcoming elections and political chaos in our country and in countries around the world. I see them all connected, and I do not see it as a gain for freedom, truth, beauty, goodness. None of that. I see it politically motivated. That's my take on it. I sure hope I'm wrong. I sure hope I'm wrong.
Well, Father, I actually have in my mind a phrase, where do wars come from? And I have heard that since I was a boy. I remember reading the Epistle of James, an epistle which Luther referred to as an epistle of straw, because James speaks of doing good works, and Luther was always saying, we are saved by faith, not by good works. But James, and I believe this is the Apostle James, who is buried in Compostela in Spain. And he says in his epistle, where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and do not obtain. That's a kind of financial reason.
Mm-hmm.
You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. We say, blessed are the peacemakers. We quote Jesus himself on the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. There were attempts at different times to make peace treaties, to create an architecture for peace. We thought after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain, and that was a dramatic moment. I was alive. I was in Rome at that time. I saw Gorbachev when he came to visit Pope John Paul II on December 1st, 1989. I saw him get out of the car, his wife Raisa. They saw John Paul II. Everyone thought, this terrible red beast, the Soviet Union, the communist. And then 2 years later, they were dissolved. And we thought there would be a peace dividend. And in the 90s, we were all hoping we would have a kind of structure of peace in the world. We wouldn't be redoubling our nuclear weapons or our biological weapons. And somehow that era of peace did not come. And I always have echoing in my mind the memory of Our Lady of Fatima, who said, in the end, my immaculate heart will triumph, and a period of peace shall be granted to the world. And I'm hopeful in that. But now the shadows of war are gathering.
Apparently, Robert, I understand that hope, but apparently that was not the end, right? In the end. And that was not the end.
I don't understand. Can you explain?
Well, what did Our Lady say? You just quoted it. In the end, my immaculate heart.
Well, she refers to things spreading, entire nations being annihilated, I believe. But in the end, do you recall that prophecy?
Yes, in the end, my immaculate heart will conquer, will win. The point was though that she was talking about Russia spreading its errors around the world, and those errors were nothing less than Marxism, communism.
Okay.
The crazy thing about that, Robert, I heard that as a child. You heard it as a child growing up. We heard these prophecies. We heard the story of Fatima. I remember it between Fatima and Lourdes as being the most impressive stories I had ever heard. And we were worried about Marxism, communism, taking over the world, spreading its errors, and even to our shores. And people found that absolutely too fantastic to believe. Well, now they're here. Now they're here. We really, truly have been invaded by Marxism. Much of our political attitudes are Marxist. Socialism is part of our lives. And the craziest thing about it, at least it seems on the surface, is that Russia, the author of all of these errors, seems to have become less communist, less Marxist.
Yeah.
Seems to. I don't have a pulse. I can't take the pulse of Russia. I don't know exactly what's happening there, if anybody does. But certainly those errors have spread. They have spread all over the world. There is a lot more envy, jealousy, wars breaking out all over, and wars within countries, civil wars, as in the United States of America at present. But all over the world, this is happening. And it certainly can be traced back to much of the propaganda that Russia exported in Marxism. They've certainly been busy.
Yeah.
The irony that I see is that they seem to have backed off, and we seem to have really picked up the football and run.
I know. So right there is a key point. I've visited Russia. Some people know this almost every year since 1999. So I've been there more than 20 times, and I've met with some of the leaders in the Russian Orthodox Church and even in the Kremlin with an advisor of Putin. And we talked about this whole question of whether they would be part of Western culture, whether they would return to their Christian roots of Russian Orthodox faith. They were building all the churches. Some people said this is an illusion. This is almost a communist veneer that they're painting over a hardcore atheism that remains, a very materialistic society. But as I would just like to state on one occasion in particular, and of course these journeys involve various religious matters. The Pope John Paul II wanted to visit Russia. Pope Benedict encouraged me to visit Russia. He said, make friends because personal relationships are extremely important. Write articles and showing the human face of the Russians, etc. So I didn't go on my own volition. I went under the highest authority. But one occasion, not far from the Kremlin, in a church, preparing before a liturgy, I met with a couple of Russian Orthodox ladies who were, say, in their 30s. And I said, how is Russia today? Is there really religious faith? And they said, with great difficulty, we are returning to a faith that was stripped from us by communism. And they said, but what we're concerned about is that the West, in a new form, has taken over in its sexual libertinism, in its LBGT, and its transgender. They said, we are concerned that this is a different form of communism, splitting the genders, making male and female, instead of complementary kind of competitors. And we perceive this as a new form of the old communist ideology, which was creating class struggle, etc. Now it's gender struggle. We are wondering if you will succumb to this, but we will never succumb to it because we were suffering so much in that whole period, 70 years of communist atheism, that all the tricks of the communists no longer can deceive us. But we're afraid you're too innocent and will embrace these things. I felt the Holy Spirit in that conversation. I was saying, my goodness, these people have passed through a lot. They've prayed, they've reflected, and they're trying to build something. And now we're at war with them. In a sense, we're about to have our troops go there if things don't change.
But this is sort of what I'm saying, Robert. Don't you see that it seems as if the two sides have sort of switched morale? I mean, I'm not so 100%, but I mean, it seems that they seem less socialistic, less communist, and we seem more. That's what I'm trying to say. And what you hit a point when you were talking to those women. You hit a very, very important point that they made, and that you made, and I've made on this program many times. The Marxists from the beginning knew that they could not influence, especially the West, but especially the United States, and especially the United States. I'll just leave it at that. On the poverty issue, the poor against the rich. Now they could work that system all through Latin America, all through Hispano-America. That was no problem, because there were great distinctions between the wealthy, which was like 2 to 5% in one country, and 90% poor. That's easy to do. But they didn't have such an easy time of it in the United States and in the West in general. So they had to create other divisions, and they've been very, very, very capable and good at doing those divisions between the races, between the religions, between religion and atheism, between anything they could, to divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. That's exactly what they've been doing, and they've been very successful at it.
Well, one of the reasons that you are so fascinating is you've had a privileged life, and you went to Rome in your 20s, and you met key people and became friends with them. Perhaps among the Curia, the three men, Archbishop, later Cardinal Gagnon, and with his famous report investigating in the 1970s, you lived in the same building with him, you knew him well. Then Monsignor Marini, who is a very key Vatican official for 40 years, and Archbishop Benelli, who was the key official inside the Curia in the late 70s, then went to become Archbishop of Florence, and then died in the early 1980s, just on the edge of coming back to Rome to become, I think, Secretary of State.
That's right.
A kind of mystery. But so you knew these key church figures, monsignors, you talked to them many times, and then you knew, perhaps even more important, the top associate advisor, assistant, Mother Pasqualina, the German who was at the side of Pope Pius XII for more than 40 years. What did these people tell you about communism in Russia?
Every one of them that you just mentioned saw Marxism, communism, as the absolute threat. And it wasn't just a political threat. We look at it here as a political threat. These men and women saw Marxism as a political threat, certainly, but also as a spiritual threat, as a moral threat to all of the countries in which where they could get a hold of and get any foot in the door. That's all they wanted at that time. I also lived for 14 years in Mexico, and I saw firsthand what the theology of liberation did to the clergy of that country, and then to the people of that country. It was all divisive, everything divisive, create chaos. They certainly did that. And then I came back to the United States and worked in New York, and one of the first things that I had to combat, named pastor of Our Lady of Guadalupe Church on 14th Street, was communism. Was Marxism that we had right down the street from us, who organized anything that I did as a pastor spiritually. We had thousands. We had thousands of parishioners, most of them young men in their 20s to mid 30s, would come up to the United States to work, but thousands of them. Right down the street was a Marxist center to combat everything that we were doing down the street in the church. Everything. I saw it firsthand. I experienced it. This has been going on for years and years and years, but it never has hit. It never has hit people, especially in the United States and Canada, England, France, all of the West. It has never hit at our fiber. It hasn't gotten down to the real roots. Now it is. Well, and this is of great concern to me.
Well, wouldn't you say that the fundamental point is that the Marxism seems to be a chameleon that goes from one type of struggle to another, let's call it these two being class struggle on the one hand and economic vision,
Yes.
and the second now being this gender question, a kind of division between men and women, an envy, a competition, dividing us in our understanding of our fundamental nature and our creation of families, placing the state on the one hand as the mega organism that subsumes our lives, and then the individual person no longer in a family context. And this is never been accepted by the church. And yet the church too now seems to be embracing this sort of new gender ideology, which is what we're going to get into in the second part of this program.
What you were talking about, Robert, you mentioned it just a while back, talking to those women and visiting the USSR at that time.
Yeah.
As you did. These people understood what division was. They understood it. It hit them. It cut their families in half. It cut them in half. It was a schizophrenic existence that they lived.
Yes.
For years, it was terrible, terrible. It is now happening to us. This is what scares me. But they are Marxism. You asked about the spiritual dimension of this. Bear with me. This is going to sound off the wall. It's going to sound really reactionary.
Well,
but I'm going to say it. But I'm going to say it anyway. You know me better than to think that I'm not going to say it.
Well, have the courage.
Marxism is a part of modernism. This is the same thing we have been fighting for 150 years. You can start with the French Revolution if you want a starting place, but it is modernism. It is taking away, stripping away all of the divine, all of the miraculous, all of the otherworldness that is part of our existence, taking that away and replacing it with naturalism. Marxism is just the latest in this whole series of things that has been attacking man and God. It's been going on for a long time. Both Marini and Mother Pasqualina, both of them said on two different occasions when I was talking to each one individually, they hadn't gotten together to make this up. They knew it. Marini and Mother Pasqualina, both of them could go historically from the beginning. Gnosticism, Arianism, and name most of the heresies of the church. And then they would come up to the end and say, then it was Protestantism, then it was called this, then it was called that. Today it's called Marxism. And they both ended with the same thing. I wonder what it'll be called tomorrow. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's divide and conquer, divide and conquer. And this has been going on militarily from the Greeks and Romans and even before, but also spiritually, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. This is why we know that the Holy Ghost is what? The principle of unity, not division, but unity. And this is why we always pray to the Holy Ghost for guidance and for unification, that he unite us. We're suffering from being split in half, split into quarters. This is what's going on. This is what's going on. Well, and of course, when that happens, Robert, you are vulnerable to anyone who comes along with a solution to put it back together. Yeah. These are the great dictators did this. They divided, and then they said, I've got they caused the problem and caused chaos, and then later came on around and said, I've got the solution. Well, of course they've got the solution. They caused the problem. Right? And this is what we're going through still today. It's a bad thing. It's not a good place we're in today.
Yeah. Well, what it always seems in the end is they want to deny a certain aspect of reality and simplify. Yeah. And you said it's the supernatural, it's the holy, it's the divine, the transcendent, the divinity of Christ. They want to turn Christ into a revolutionary leader with a machine gun. They want to turn reality into a political struggle. And they want to say that human life has got to be waged in these 70 years for political justice, for sexual justice, etc. There is no second story that is metaphysical, above the physical. Trans, transcendent, arising above what our senses tell us. But the entire gospel is about the fact that there is a kingdom of heaven, there is a kingdom above, there is something that transcends physical, temporal reality. There is a deeper truth, a deeper reality. Everything that we have is passing away. St. Paul speaks of this. We have no.
And Robert, may I just interject? You're absolutely correct. Let me just interject one word. And this, our Lord would use this word if he were here today to say it. Classless. Salvation is for everyone. It is not one class against the other class, against this one, against that, Roman against Jew, Jew against Phoenician. No, it's for everyone.
Okay.
This is the great difference to the materialism we're seeing today.
So absolutely. Therefore, our very first struggle is to go beyond class and say, if you're going to execute or torture a noble woman, for example, like the Romanovs in Russia, or even Marie Antoinette in France, you're trying to execute all the representatives of a class society instead of creating and transforming whatever injustices into a just society, in a community of justice and of love, and moving people together, unity. This is the Christian answer. And this is denied by these political movements. And this gets us to this question of sexuality today, which is it's a polemical question. We might even be deplatformed, but we have to talk about homosexuality in the church and in the world. Father Murr, is this a subject you're willing to talk about?
Sure. Let's go right at it.
Okay, the Pope just wrote a preface. And the preface itself that he wrote was not very reprehensible. It wasn't no words in his preface were able to be sharply criticized, but the preface was to this book. In other words, the Pope, in a sense, blessed this book by writing the preface, even though inside the preface he doesn't really deal with the themes. He just says that he does nice scriptural interpretation. He's very thoughtful. But I think it was a mistake to write the preface. I think the Pope was badly counseled, or that the Pope is in some way imprudent, or perhaps has I wrote about this preface in a letter. This is one of my Moynihan letters just a few days ago, and I don't even comment it. And someone wrote to me, why do you seem to be supporting both James Martin and Pope Francis? I said, I didn't support anyone. I just reported that he wrote this preface. And here's the text of the preface, where he says he does nice scriptural interpretation. But essentially, what this is all about is the identity of the person on a sexual basis. To me, from my youth forward till today, we have been taught in the Christian tradition that there is no identity of this type that's stamped upon us in our minds and souls. Did the Pope write it, or did someone write it and affix his signature to it? Excellent question. I cannot answer that question. I suspect, as well as you, that the Pope had a ghostwriter and probably just affirmed it. Damien, do you think Pope Francis read the book before prefacing it? I don't have the answer to that. I think he may have leafed through it. He's met a couple of times now with James Martin. And Father Murr, you may have, there's an instance of one of their meetings, Father James Martin.
Well, to be truthful here, they've met quite a few times.
Okay.
They've met quite a few times. And Father Martin publicly states that the Pope is completely behind him and supportive of his ministry.
Well, let's explain why we can critique that. How can we critique that in a fundamental way?
How do we critique what exactly, Robert?
This ministry and this growing.
Well, look. I've said many times here that for years in Manhattan, I worked with a group called Courage.
Right.
We worked with homosexual men and women, and I saw the results were phenomenal, just beautiful, incredible. I never saw another movement, and I'll say this. I know it's bold to say, and it's quite a claim to make, but I'll make it. I have never seen a movement in the church or outside the church, but certainly not in the church, that resulted in creating so many saints.
Amazing.
I mean that.
So,
These are men and women who left a lifestyle, answered God's call, returned, and continue to live lives that are exemplary. I mean that.
okay.
Daily Mass, Rosary, office, divine office. I know priests who don't say the divine office. These lay people wouldn't think of missing it.
Well,
Daily.
Father, this is two things. First, I want to ask you to explain courage, the movement, or the apostolate. I think it's Father Harvey. Second,
Yes.
I want to ask about human sexuality in general. We could say my nature is to be lustful, so I'm going to be the L movement. God bless me for being a luster. What is this about?
And you would be and you know what? You would be applauded, Robert, because isn't he honest?
Well, we're about at that. We're about at that point. But
Yes.
our whole teaching was that agape love, erotic love, and friendly love. I think you gave a homily when we were there with you in Spain about friendship as the highest form of love. But when you have a brother, when you have a sister, I've got 4 brothers and 2 sisters. I've got a mother and a father. Normally, you don't have lustful feelings, sexual feelings toward your friends, toward your siblings, toward your parents. But our society is being sexualized. My deep belief is about 98% of our deep experience of love in life is with people who are our friends, our siblings, our relatives, people we trust. And that the other tremendous power of sexuality should be oriented towards procreation and creating a family. But our society has demolished this concept, but the church used to stand against it, but is now seemingly supporting it. This is troubling to me.
Yeah, and again, should we go back to when did this begin? It
Go
began
ahead.
it began in the United States strongly in the 1920s and in the 1930s. The concept and the terminology free love is taken from the 1930s. It is exactly when communism, Marxism began filtering into the United States.
Well, there was an element of communism that wanted to share the husbands and the wives and not have any sort of family structures to impede the unity of the party.
Yes, because we've got to destroy the family, Robert. Because if you have a family, that's a unity. People are united, and we can't have people united if we're communists. They've got to be divided. You've got to have people hating one another in a family. You've got to divide. You have to divide. Everything is division. Divide and conquer. That's exactly what it is. And when you're in a society, it costs something to be good. All right? It costs to be good. It costs discipline. It costs time. It costs effort. It costs to be good. In the long run, it brings happiness. If you want to put the cart before the horse, you can look for happiness and find just happiness, lust, and fulfillment that way. But it never brings you to happiness. It never brings you to a satisfied life.
Well,
but what they're trying to do, the Marxists have done this for generations, is divide and conquer again. And it goes right back to the family. The family has to be destroyed.
okay.
That's an obstacle. And they've done a fantastic job. My hat's off to them. I'm telling you that they've done a magnificent job. They've destroyed entire societies by destroying the family.
Okay, so what you're saying is we might call it a diabolic degeneration of human society into a cult-like membership in a Gnostic group, which denies the supernatural and the holy. It says there's only pleasure and nothing else. And that has given us, therefore, a false world, which people try to reach and cling to, and they end up becoming miserable. So there's no blessedness in it. But the church,
Robert, congratulations, beautifully put, really beautifully put. But here, and it brings us to this point, and you've mentioned it a couple times, and I wanted to just clarify that and agree with it. Reality. Who would have thought that things would get so divided and so perverse that reality itself would be impossible to see?
yeah,
And they have made reality. You see a man? No, I see a woman. You see a cat? No, I see a dog. You see whatever you want to be, this is the new reality, and God forbid you contradict me. So reality is in question. Do you know how dangerous that is, to question reality?
If reality,
wow.
It's
for your own self-preservation.
Well, it's the definition of madness.
It is madness. It is madness.
It means you don't know what reality is. You have no relationship. Right. You're just inventing it in your dream. You're living.
Absolutely.
Oh, but I remember two things. In Moscow, on a number of occasions, talking with people, they would turn their head like this, just to see if there was an agent at the next table listening to us, right. maybe taking a photograph. And I was thinking, we have become a little bit that way. I was with someone the other day in a restaurant who said to me, don't say those things, because someone may note and may come over and be so upset with you, they might punch you.
Yes.
I was saying we're in a society where people are being led into misery, and that's my view. And I would like to protect even them from that, and their children, my grandchildren. I don't have any yet. I hope to. But you as a priest, as a pastor, a shepherd, you must see that we're leading people like lemmings to a cliff. And even this ministry, which is supposed to be, you've got two opposed ministries. One is, I wanted you to talk about Courage and Father Harvey, and then this new ministry of Father Martin and other people, which Pope Francis seems to be blessing.
Yes. Which is to me and to many people outrageous, and unacceptable as Catholics. Just take, for example, one of these. The Holy Father is congratulating Father Martin for his exegesis, for his masterful handling of biblical texts. Here's a text. Here's a story from the Bible. The death and resurrection of Lazarus. Right?
Yes.
Now, Father Martin treats it this way. I hope not to do him injustice. I've read only articles on it. I confess I have not read the book, nor do I intend to.
Yeah, but however, this is the center of his book. It's the title, Come Forth, the Raising of Lazarus. His entire
Lazarus being resurrected from the dead is people coming out of the closet. There, you want it in a nutshell? That's it. Now, if that's what that is, I quit.
So there's a fundamental.
It's ridiculous.
It's a ridiculous error, and it's presented by a very actually intelligent man.
He is an intelligent man. Yes, he is.
And in fact, I just spoke with a leading official in the Curia in Rome who said he didn't like me and he didn't like my writing. And I said, well, have you, we've never met. Let's talk.
If he's an official in the Roman Curia, I'd take that as a feather in my cap, Robert.
Well, thank you. But it's difficult at times. In any case, we talked for half an hour. And he said, I know James Martin, and he's a good man. He's a good man, he said. So we have to go back now to get the whole structure of this. It often is an affiliation from Cardinal Carlo Maria Martini. Are you familiar with him?
He was my rector. He was rector at the Gregorian University. Yes. When I went to go complain to him, I went to him to complain to him about a couple of things that were being taught in class, and this was in the early 70s.
Yeah, there you go, Father. So
he told me to calm down.
So you know everybody, and I've met Cardinal Martini as well. He was kind of regarded as the other Ratzinger, as it were, the Italian who was more modern and more open to these LBGT initiatives. He had come from Milan. He became the Archbishop of Milan. He had been in Jerusalem at the École Biblique in Jerusalem. He'd come to Rome at the Biblicum, the study for scriptures next to the Gregorian. He was rector of the Gregorian, and he was really considered the head of the San Gallen Mafia group.
Yes.
And he wrote couple of long interview books, and he said the church is 200 years behind the times, and I hope through these pontificates of Ratzinger and whoever comes after Ratzinger that we will move forward into the modern world. And that was Martini. I have to tell you, I met him and I said, this is an impressive man. Didn't you think?
Very impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, this is why when we're dealing with people, and someone once told me, as you report on the Vatican, first of all, the first thing is the person that's in front of you, whether it's Mother Pasqualina or Cardinal Gagnon or Pope Benedict XVI or Wojtyla, Pope John Paul II from Poland. Each of these people has a formation. They have a history, they have a background, they have a family background. They were one only child, or they were among 10 children, etc. And Martini was the representative of an Italian style which tried to be modernistic while retaining some aspects of the Catholic faith. And he was impressive as he did this.
I'll tell you, Martini in a word, Robert. Martini had a stature and a way of presenting himself.
Yes.
And a way of behaving and everything. He was Italian class.
Exactly, yeah.
He was Italian class. There's a classy Italian. He was the epitome of it. And he was, and he also, and you'll understand the terminology, he was incarnate la bella figura.
Bella figura, yeah.
He knew how to do that, and he did it well. I must correct you on one thing, not correct you, but just point out a little bit of a, well, maybe correct you. The founder of the St. Gallen Mafia was really Theodore McCarrick.
Oh, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? He was the one who started going there and getting other people to go there, McCarrick. Now, the one who was in charge of it at the time of the election under Pope John Paul II and Benedict was Martini. No longer McCarrick, but it was Martini. You're right on that.
Okay, Father Murr, I'm going to completely agree with you and even go further. I came across information about McCarrick that at the age of 21 years old, which puts him somewhere in the 1950s, he spent an entire year in St. Gallen, Switzerland.
There we go. There we go. Yes.
Now, what he did there and who he talked to and what happened and why remains a mystery. And McCarrick is still alive. I'm now thinking I must try. I don't know if he's mentally sound any longer, but we had many conversations over the years. I'd like to
Wouldn't he be a great one to interview, Robert?
Let's go. Well, we'll try. If I get there, we'll call you on video and we'll talk together.
That would be wonderful.
We will try to.
Because he would really be able to explain the St. Gallen Mafia. And I think if he's at all a man of God, he understands that the end is coming. I'm sure that he's made his peace with God, or tried to. Well, this also would be quite an invitation to clarify some things that would be a move toward more peace with God, and help the church understand where we are today. I think so anyway.
Two different cardinals had told me that I ought to go see him and invite him to publicly come forward and speak to the world and say something along the lines that you just said.
I think it'd be great. I think it'd be great.
I would say we've got to go to this last news item to bring full circle this conversation, which is a bit in haste. It's a bit emotional because I'm disturbed by how far along this has advanced in the church. I feel like we are part of a remnant, as it were. And it's a mystery to me because we represent, I feel profoundly, the great tradition of the church, which we are trying to hand on to the next generation. And someone in the chat said that I was speaking of Father Martin, as the Vatican official told me, as a good person. I was not making a judgment or even agreeing about that. I was saying that's what he was said to be by this Vatican officials. And that's why he seems in person to be amiable, to be thoughtful, to be kind. And this is, in a way, what these other three men also seem, who were just named to be counselors to the Congregation for the Dicastery now of the Doctrine of the Faith. Yesterday, the Pope named these three men to be part of the congregation. Therefore, there's 20 or 30 people who have meetings to discuss what to say with new documents. And they have their voice there in the council. And these three have joined. Cardinal Jose Tolentino de Mendoza, prefect of the Dicastery for Culture and Education. He's from Portugal. And there's an article, why are we bringing these men forward? Ed Penton, a very fine British journalist, just wrote in the National Catholic Register, all three have on numerous occasions said the Church's teaching on sexuality and on homosexuality needs to be revised. They are favorable to a revision of our teaching. Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, prefect of the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints. That's the dicastery that Cardinal Becciu was heading until he went to trial in the Vatican on corruption charges. Semeraro, I know him, and I also know Archbishop Bruno Forte. Forte is up in Chieti Vasto in the center, in Italy, in the Abruzzo region, near the coast of the Adriatic. He's regarded as a kind of Italian Ratzinger, a kind of theologian, a fine mind, a kind of Romano Guardini, but he's a liberal. He's a progressive. And I've met him. When you meet him, you say, this is a learned man. This man has studied the history of the church fathers, the theology. But somehow, like all of them, they feel that we were a little too puritanical or neurotic about sexuality, and they want to change and become more modernistic. Father Murr, can you comment on these choices of Pope Francis?
Let me just ask you a question. In all of the history, everything that you've read in literature and in the study of history, and we're both kind of history fanatics, and in the spiritual history of the church, the Jews of the Old Testament, have you ever seen the devil present himself as a buffoon?
Oh, excellent point. Yes.
Well, he's always intelligent, isn't he? Very intelligent, well-spoken, a leader with charisma. He can convince crowds. Okay, so the man is intelligent, and you're saying, because you're being kind. I know you, Robert. You're saying liberal. Well, I would say their orthodoxy is very much at question. Now, I'm not the Orthodox police, but I'm telling you, I know what is Catholic and what is not Catholic, as you do, and as any decent Catholic, well-educated Catholic knows. These people, I don't care if they're cardinals, archbishops, what they are, many of their stances are not Catholic. Their positions are not Catholic. The Catholic position is always this: we understand man. First of all, because we are men. But we understand man in the light of the fall of man, original sin. This is where we understand man. We understand his condition. And what the church is trying to do in its own way, which was very fallible, full of absolutely replete of imperfect men and women. What the church has always been trying to do with the light of the Holy Ghost is invite man to stand up taller, to be more than what he was, to convert, to be different, to progress, to get to the goal, to become closer to God. We understand that people fail and they fall and they're imperfect. We understand all of that.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Father. It's the truth.
That's it. We understand it all. This is why we have the confession. This is why I go to confession. This is why you go to confession. We go because we're imperfect. A lot of people don't go because they're perfect. They've already made it. God bless them. Good. They don't need that. I do. We're imperfect. But the church is always inviting us to this level of to perfect ourselves with the grace of God. All of a sudden, the church is saying, no, you know what? You're fine. God loves you right where you are. Don't you worry about anything. That's hogwash. I'm sorry. That's not
It began with
Catholic.
Judas. It began with Judas, Father.
Yep.
Father, there's an article by Julia Maloney that just came out this
I
morning.
love Julie Maloney. Great lady.
Yeah, she wrote a beautiful book on St. Gallen. I think, could we have a vision of that article possibly? And she describes these three men, and there's one phrase in there, if possible, I'd like to read. But
Yes.
what that phrase is a nun in Portugal talking about same-sex marriages. And essentially what she says is, I've met these people, they love each other, let's bless them. And in other words, this teaching, people should be allowed to love who they wish to love. And maybe we can find, this is the article by Julia this morning, and somewhere in, this is Cardinal Jose Tolentino. And inside this article, there's a quote from a nun. Where is that? Well, it's okay. But the nun
Can you
said,
paraphrase it?
that what I just said. What can we say about, we must allow people to love whoever they want to love, is to have any love. This love is sort of the supreme. In a way, Cardinal McCarrick himself once said that to me after a lunch we had. He said, Bob, in the end, it's all about the love. So what's the problem with this?
The problem with this is because it's about the love. Our definitions of love don't seem to be the same.
Okay, let's explain that, because we're getting near to the end of our program. We have to clarify, why is our teaching being distorted now? What's happened to it? Why was this very profound, difficult, but pure, austere teaching preserved for 2,000 years, and why does it now seem to be about to be overturned, even at the highest level?
In the early 60s, and you know this very well, this is a horse we've almost beaten completely to death, so I don't want to go back into it. But the Second Vatican Council was called to try to get the church more in tune with the world. Hopefully that it would result in the world being more in tune with the church. Okay, that was the idea. It didn't work that way. It certainly did not work that way. The church became more worldly, not worldly in as much as possessions. I don't mean it that way. Worldly, however, also, but the church became more worldly in its philosophy. It took up what the world was laying down. This was okay by the world. Fashions were okay by the world. They're okay by us. Sex education in school is okay by the world. Well, it's okay by us. It's everything one by one, everything that the world set down, which was in great part contrary to the will of God and contrary to the teaching of the church. Now the church said, yes, that's a wonderful thing. Well, it's not wonderful. And we stopped standing up for what we were supposed to stand up for. That's the problem. Let me just make a quick parenthesis, Robert, and you know this better than I. We've got the same thing happening right now in communist China. Our church sold out to the communist Chinese. There's no two ways about it. I don't know how many millions or billions of dollars we're getting every year for betraying Catholics who gave their lives to promote the faith, to believe the faith, to live it, and were imprisoned, gave their lives, were killed. All of a sudden, the Communist Party has taken over the church with the complete blessing of the Catholic Church, to the point where the sovereign pontiff won't listen to a cardinal who's trying to tell him, who's a Chinese cardinal, who's trying to tell him the truth. He'll have him sitting outside for 3 days. This is so crazy, but it's not going right. It's not going right. And I'm convinced that God is not going to permit this from continuing on this path. It's going to happen that we're going to get back to God. How that's going to happen, I don't know, but it's coming soon.
Well, we've got 3 or 4 minutes. We have to finish. We need to present a proposal for how this podcast, how your retreat center, how our pilgrimages, how our books are going to assist us in what we might call the recognize and resist, to continue the traditional Orthodox teaching of the Catholic faith in a time when billions of dollars, whether from the Chinese government or the mega corporations, are shifting, and the devil is presenting himself as an angel of light, an angel of love. We need to continue, and we need the support of people. Let's show your books, some of my books, and let's talk about how we go forward, Father. How can we continue, just as we have been, or can we do something more? Well, these are your books.
Robert, you and I both know that what has been most lacking in the last 70 years is education. We do not have an educated Catholic population. We don't. People have stopped reading. A lot of people, we've lost 70% of practicing Catholics to begin with.
Amazing, yeah.
But the remaining Catholics, most of them don't know their faith. They don't know their faith. We have not been catechizing anyone since 1965. No one has been catechized correctly that I know of, except in home schools and in different parishes that where people held dearly onto the faith. But people don't know people don't know their basic faith, and this is really a problem. It's really a problem, and it's a growing problem. So because when you don't know, you'll listen to whatever opinion comes along. Oh well, that's what they're saying. That must be the truth. Well, it's not the truth. So you have the truth, but you don't know it.
So my conclusion, perhaps I'll propose, you and I together could write a kind of prospectus or manifesto for renewal of Catholic catechesis.
Oh, absolutely.
And we could say, how do we do this on the liturgy? How do we do it on questions of morality, on questions of philosophy? Do we, follow Thomas Aquinas, or to what extent? And we could perhaps come up with a beautiful little volume, which we could talk about as a kind of structure for a renewal or a preservation of the faith in the next generation, as we reflect on everything that we've seen and heard in these past 50 years.
Robert, I've told you this before. I didn't write it. It's not mine. I took it from a brilliant Spanish Jesuit of 2 centuries ago. I took his catechism and put it in simpler, easier language, modern Spanish, especially for prisoners. Spanish-speaking prisoners who knew nothing of their faith. They're in prison and they're being converted to Islam and to Southern Baptists and this, because they know nothing of their own Catholic faith. I had to explain to a group of them, I went to visit a prison in California, that Our Lady of Guadalupe is the Virgin Mother of God. It's Mary, the Mother of God. They had no concept even of that. And this is, it's bad. It's bad. And so I wrote a quick catechism. It's a simple one. I think that's where to begin.
Okay.
Just catechism holding the 10 commandments, the precepts of the church, the 7 capital sins, the 7 sacraments. What are they? Basically, those things that we all were taught in grade school. We just knew them. We've held on to them all of our lives as guideposts. Nobody knows these things today.
So there's a kind of romantic and brave tradition which still needs to be defended, the apostolic tradition, the teaching of Jesus Christ. It cannot be the teaching of Karl Marx and Freud and Darwin.
No, it cannot be.
And we have to be one more link in that chain. If we receive from any readers approval, please like these videos. That helps us a lot, because the algorithm then spreads them around and we'll have a few dozen more people join us. If you wish to support us in some way, there are ways to do that. Go to our website. If you wish to be in touch with Father Murr, write to us. If you wish to join our pilgrimage in October to visit him personally for several days and to talk over these matters in person in southern Spain, we do have just a small number of spaces at the end of October. And come back next week We appreciate you all very much. Father, could you just close the program with a blessing?
Absolutely. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater, Filius, Spiritus Sanctus. Amen. God bless, Robert. And until next week.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.